Hello all, today we'll be jumping into Blueprint to explore some case uses for some really fantastic nodes like timeline, timers to do things like manipulate scale and move objects around an environment. Let's jump in. So I'm going to create a new basic level. I'm going to start off by maybe make a new folder. I'm going to create a blueprint by right-clicking, going to Blueprint class of type actor. I'm going to call this BP moving object. And at the same time, I'm going to create a new particle system. So I'm going to right-click, say New Niagara System. I'm going to copy an existing. I lied. I'm going to use New System from Selected Emitter. I'm going to do a omnidirectional burst. I'm going to hit finish. I'm going to call this NS burst. I'm going to double click into my BP moving object. And I'm going to add a few components. So I'll right click, or I'll click on add and I'll say box collision. And I'm going to set the box extent to 250 by 250 by 250. I'm going to hit compile. I'm going to hit add, and I'm going to add a cube. I'm going to go to my event graph, and I'm going to add some variables. So I'll start off, and I will add a, let's make a transform, and we're going to call this target transform. I'm going to change this to a transform type. I'm going to press Control D to duplicate that. I'm going to call this current transform. I'm going to create a float called scale multiplier target. And I'm going to call this is going to be a float. Press Control D. I'm going to call this scale multiplier current. So let's jump in. So on event begin play, this is when the game begins. And what we're going to do is we're going to first make an event, and we're going to right click and say custom event. And I'm going to say add custom event. And let's call move to location. And basically what I need to do is I'm going to make a volume, and the object inside the volume is going to move from location to location, and it's going to select new values for the target scale and rotation and location, and then at the end of that movement it's going to do it again. So to do that, what we're going to do is we are going to grab our target transform. We're going to pull this out and say set. We're going to right click this, and we're going to say split struct pin. We're going to grab our box, we're going to pull it off here, and then we're going to right click and we're going to say random point in bounding box. We're going to click this. We're going to pull off the box and say get box extent. We're going to pull off of the box and say get world location. We're going to drag this into here, this into here, and then this into here. So we've now set the target location, and let's pull off of here and say get random, actually, let's say random rotator, and then we're going to click roll. We're going to pull this into here. So now we've created a random rotation. And then let's grab our scale multiplier target. We'll get this, and let's set this value to 3. And what we'll actually do is we'll change this. This is going to be scale target min and scale target max. So max will be 3. I'm going to click over here, and min will be 1. So let's pull off of this and say random float in range with min as the minimum, max as the maximum. And then what we want to do is pull off of this and say make vector. And we're going to use a uniform scale. So we'll just pull this into here, here, and here. And so the random point, so basically, a number between 1 and 3 will become the x, y, and z value. A random rotator will become the transformer rotation, and a random point within this box volume will become the location destination. So I'm going to pull this into here, and then on event begin play, I'm going to say move to location. So on the very first frame, it's going to call this event. It's going to move. It's going to call this event move to location, where I create this series of values. And then next, I'm going to execute the change of those values across a node called a timeline. So I'm going to pull off here and say add timeline. And we'll call this move object or change object transform. So what you do is you'll click into this timeline. Actually, first let's explain what this does. So basically, the timeline itself, it allows you to execute a series of functions like play, stop, and reverse. Those are more advanced functionalities, but right now we'll just sort of get into play. So I often use play from start instead of just play, because it will start it from the very beginning, where there's the ability to pause it, and that adds more complicated functionality. But for now, let's play from start. When you use whatever happens on this update, this will happen every frame of the timeline, and at the end it will come out this finished execution pin. So I'll double click, and I have this empty page. So what I'll do is in the top left, I'll click track. I'm going to add a float track. I'll select that, and I will name this timeline, this curve, and let's call this transform change value. I'm going to right click, add key to curve float, and I'm going to do that again. This creates two keys, which are just float values along a timeline. So on the X is time, and then on the Y is what value will be spit out. So I'll make my first key 0, 0, my second key 1, 3. Actually, I'm going to make it 3, 1. So at 0 seconds, the value is 0. At 3 seconds, the value is 1. And I'm going to change my length up here to 3. Go back to my event graph. I'll pull out here, and I will say, I'm going to right click actually, I'm going to say set world transform of my cube. And I'm going to pull this into here. And so I'm going to use next what's called a linear interpolate. So I'll pull off of here, and I'll say lerp transform. And what linear interpolate or lerp does is it basically using a contribution value, which right now is our 0 to 1, which we just created inside this. So basically it's going to push this value into this node, and it's going to move, basically it's going to shift the values between an initial value and a second value. So our target that we've created is target, and that's the B value, and then our current transform is going to go in here. And let's actually, let's get the world location of our cube in the very beginning, and let's say set current transform. Actually, let's we'll split. Yeah, that'll work for now. And so we're going to pull this back into here, and then once the timeline has reached 3 seconds, what we'll do is we're going to set the current transform as the target transform, because by the time the timeline has ended, we will be at that B location, and then we need to say now we're at that location, so that the next time around it will start at that transform value and then move to a newly created value that we have made. And so at the end of this, we're going to then loop it and do it again. But just sort of to signal that we've reached the end, what we'll do is we'll spawn that Niagara system that we created. So I'm going to say spawn system location, and hit Control Space to bring up my browser. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to use the arrow key to drop it into place. And let's, we'll just break this by right-clicking. We'll split it, and I'll just drag the location in. So at the destination, the final location, it will spawn that little burst we created, which is just a simple Niagara emitter. And again, so once we've done this once, what we want to do is just loop it again. And so we're going to call this event that we made before, which is called move to location. And then we should be good. So in theory, what we have done is the cube, we've created some logic that will make this cube move between any random point within this bounding box. And it will have each loop, it will create a unique rotation value, a unique scale value, and pick a random point within the box. It will spawn a Niagara system at the location, and then it will reset and loop again. So I'm going to hit compile, I'm going to save, and let's give that a shot and see if it works. So I'm going to drag that blueprint into my environment, and I will just lift it up out of the ground. I'm going to right click on the ground, I'm going to say play from here. And so we'll see that now this object is going to bounce around. Once it reaches the destination, it is going to release that particle system that it spawns, and it's going to select a new location. So this is, a simple combination of a few super valuable nodes. The timeline can do a lot of awesome things, and this is sort of just an introduction to its functionality. In the future, maybe we'll go into some more complicated examples. It can do things like, there's an event track, which I use very often. So along the length of this curve, you could call an event. And actually, I'll just show you a brief example. So I'll say add event track. And let's say at 1.5 seconds, add a key. I'll hit compile. And then this new track, which I'm going to call event. Maybe we'll just say print string. So I'll drag out and I'll say print string, and it's going to say hello. And so if I press play again, halfway through, you'll see up in the top left, it's going to say hello. So you could do any event that you wanted to, like change any variety of things. You could play a sound, you could do a lot of things, but it's another way to call events, and the timeline is super useful, so I hope you get some good use out of it. That's all for today. Thanks, guys.